help me welcome Ms. Karen Ellemann, Minister for Equal Opportunities and Nordic Cooperation of Denmark. Give her a hand. And Ms. Eyðgunn Samuelsen, Minister for Social Affairs, Housing Policy, and much more. Have a seat. Actually, you both have a lot of, you have a big resume, but you're a minister of a lot of things, both of you. And you can get a mic each here and turn it on. So what do you think so far about about the things we've heard today so far?
This is on, huh? Yeah. The most interesting things is to hear how similar the challenges are in the Nordic countries, I think. For example, the last one about working education and women. We also see in the Faroe Islands, for example, that it's a majority of the women that is taking education, and men are hunters and fishers and have not so high education. So you can see everywhere in the Nordic countries, the challenges are maybe the same.
So do we still have challenges? Do you still? I mean, we keep talking about the Nordic countries as being the good guys in the world when we talk about equality. Do you still think we have big challenges?
Sure, we definitely have challenges in every single Nordic country and around the globe. In general, speaking of equal opportunities, I don't know if you noticed, but I insist on calling myself Minister of Equal Opportunities and not Minister of Gender Equality, because I think it's very important that we move beyond the gender issue. But you started asking us what was the most interesting thing that we've heard so far this morning. And I think one of the biggest challenges, honestly, is what Sven just showed us about the inequality when it comes to men's health. I am seriously worried about inequality when we look a few years ahead, looking into how women are very well educated and how men in general, when we see the educational level and when we look into the health issues, are lacking behind lived years and the quality of the lived years. So I think one of the major issues that we really need to tackle is basically the knowledge about the equal opportunities that we do have in our countries. I know we do it in different ways when it comes to parental leave, and the political discussion in Denmark when it comes to parental leave is very often a earmarked parental leave schemes and so on, and I'm definitely not in favor of earmarking it, but I'm very much in favor of making it aware to both the men and the women that you do have equal opportunities in sharing the parental leave schemes, and that is indeed necessary to actually also make sure that men in basic have live better lives as being and managing being both fathers and workers. And then there's all of you who do not have children, and that's not the issue that everybody should have children, but just focusing on this point right now with the parental leave schemes, that's where you really see some of the problems arising for very many men.
We'll talk about that later, what success stories you have for us, but in Faroe you have different challenges. Mr. Samuelsen, you talk about young boys and girls, but women leaving the country, studying abroad and never coming back.
Yeah, that's one of our biggest challenges, and it's more girls that leave, or women, than boys. And the boys are staying back in the rural areas and have traditional jobs, so you get maybe a double gap between education and the critical mass of the society is abroad, and the challenge is to get them back, to get more diversity in the society.
But why do you have this gap? Why are young women leaving the country?
I think it's because of they can see it's very smart to have an education, and we don't have had so much opportunities for higher educations in the Faroe Islands. But now we have more education opportunities. For the last few years, the university has doubled its opportunities, and we can see that it's reversing a bit now.
So what have you done to reverse these conflicts that you have?
We have had campaigns that we have called "We Choose the Faroes," both for tourists to make it an interesting place to come, and also for the young people to choose to come back and work, and it has changed our image, I think, from a backwards society to a more interesting place to be, or more cool place to be, and the economic growth is very big at the moment, so that is also making it easier to come back, because we are when the economy is going down, it's going fast down, and people are moving abroad also to work, and when it's going up, it's going soon up, and then so we have some big I don't know how to call
ups
it.
and downs. I
Ups
guess.
and downs,
And for the first time
and
ever.
very fast.
And I guess I heard that the first time ever.
We are 50,000 people.
Yeah.
It's not much for a country, but it's much for us.
Yeah. So we have different challenges here in Denmark, and you mentioned it just a bit before about parental leave, and about, can you maybe elaborate about what kind of policies that have changed the way of men taking a part of it, and which challenges we still have in this country?
Well, basically, I think it's extremely necessary that all parents are aware of the possibilities. And honestly, we've seen some figures that men does not really know what possibilities they have. And honestly, we also see some figures and some research saying that very often the mother-to-be is having this kind of, well, parental leave is
It's
mine.
her right, yeah.
No, but it's mine, and it's maybe the father can have some part of it, but it's not really that much an issue, and it's extremely necessary because as I said before, I'm definitely not in favor of earmarking it and forcing the families 50% to you and 50% to you. I really believe in the freedom here for the families to arrange it. But being
so that
able
is how
to
it works in Denmark, just to make it clear.
That's how it works.
That the parents can go together and say, you can take these weeks, I can take these weeks, or
exactly.
you can, yeah.
Exactly. And of course, we have seen a huge a huge improvement in the schemes for men as well. When we do the negotiations and the wages, companies, and you've given the examples as well, companies are really starting now to say this is a focal point for us. This is a way to make us attractive, that we do have good parental leave schemes for our employees, and that will be both men and women, and that is extremely important that you make sure that everybody knows about it. For instance, the huge telephone company, TDC, they have been very much focused on this and have had a huge cultural change, having leaders, having ambassadors saying that I do take my parental leave. I do it for myself, for my wife, for the mother, for our child, our family, but also for the business, because I'm definitely a better worker, a better employee, if I have the balance in my life, knowing that I'm also needed and wanted in my personal life. And that comes back to the important messages from Sven before, the men's health issue, being balanced, being needed not only in work, but in the whole setting as life.
Ms. Samuelsen?
I think, we have a bit different approach to it in the Faroe Islands. We have also some weeks that are only the mothers, and some weeks that the parents can choose themselves. But lately, in the last 2 years, we have added 2 more weeks to the father alone. He had 2, now he has 4, and we are discussing how to get more to the father, because we think that the companies and the father himself seems to feel it's very difficult to take parental leave when we can choose.
What is the difficult? What is difficult? Is it the private?
In the private sector, and also maybe because we are traveling abroad or fisheries and have such jobs, but they're talking much about it's not so good. And we also have experienced that maybe the industry don't seem to see it is smart that the father take parental leave. And then it can be a way to that they can see it is smart when we have to say at least 4 weeks is the father's. It can lead the way to see how good it is for everyone, for the family, for the father, for the child, for the industry. So it's a bit different approach, maybe.
Maybe it's not that different because we do have in the parental leave scheme program, we do have the things in the very beginning, because mainly it is still the mother giving birth. Often. But you can have adoptions and all of that too. But mainly we have this earmarked in the beginning because of the mother giving birth and breastfeeding and all of that. But when it comes to the parental leave, and that's the difference between barsel or forældre, all of that's the Danish word, just to know the difference between the two. But that's where it is extremely important, the part where the child is a bit older, where the parents actually even more easy can share it. And what you're saying there about the culture in the businesses and the culture amongst fathers, amongst families, amongst friends is extremely important. I was noticing by coincidence a program on one of the Danish TV channels of Fathers on Leave, which is an extremely popular program because you suddenly find somebody to identify yourself with. We've had many mother groups, mothers on parental leave, with the trolleys, going to baby gym and baby movies and all of that. And you always see the picture where it's the mother and the child. And we really need to be much more focused on the necessity to have this shown in an equal way.
But who are we, Ms. Ellemann? Because you're talking about the media now, you're talking about TDC as a private company, but how much should the state interfere with this? You just told us that you don't want to put this and these weeks on the father.
So and luckily I do have something planned.
Yeah, let's hear.
Because not doing the legislation on the earmark, but making sure that businesses and the workforce do the cooperation on the payroll. But what we have done right now, and we started actually within a month, is a huge campaign that we're going to start. And it's not only like a minister campaign, definitely not. It's the organizations, the labor market, and the big industries and the big companies going together in this what we call Action Daddy Leave, freely translated. But it's like a huge campaign where you kind of have this tag, we are active in Action Father's Leave. We do these different initiatives in our companies. We make sure that every father-to-be is also offered a conversation on how do you actually plan your parental leave schemes, making sure that you have all of these kind of mother and father groups. So all of these initiatives will be in the huge package of this Action Daddy Leave. It will be on social media. It will be all over to create the awareness, to make sure that this dialogue is taken between the upcoming parents, within the families, amongst friends, and definitely in the businesses. And it will actually be a campaign running for several years. So being and taking part of Action Daddy Leave is something that I really expect much from.
Just you don't have to it almost sounds like Daddy, please don't leave. Like it's a different campaign though. Yeah. Stay. So in the Faroe Islands, you succeeded getting some of the women back to the country. Now, what is the next move now that they are coming back or staying? What are you doing for getting the country to be more? I don't know. Equal. I guess. Yeah.
It's one of the things is of course to make the businesses work together with us about things like parental leave, because I agree with Karen that the awareness and campaigns and things like that is also important to make a more diverse society. You have to see role models. We are working slowly to get the society more modern than it is today, and that is something the working conditions also, because I think we have the highest grade of women working in the Faroe Islands. It's more than 80%, but half of them, 54%, are working part-time, and that also is something about who has the leading role in the family, I think.
So
that you are showing things by working part-time, but you are working. So that is one area that we also have to look into. How can you not necessarily work full-time, but how can you share things at home and get more opportunities at work?
So what is the biggest difficulty right now? Is it the mindset of people, or is it the state, or is it the private sector? Like, what is the biggest obstacle?
I wouldn't say that this is a blame game, but I think it's extremely important that we all keep on creating awareness of the necessity of actually creating equal opportunities and being very focused on the diverse boards, the diverse jobs in general. And looking into the history, the other thing that we saw this morning, women coming into the labor market, creating our welfare states, our institutions, part-time jobs for the women. And it's true, in Denmark we have equal pay for equal work, but we very often fail on speaking on all the unpaid work, all the work done at home. And that kind of work, what we're trying to do, I think I have to admit that we were very much inspired by Sweden, but that's how we help each other in the Nordic countries. We have created this initiative where you can actually, where you buy help for all the services, and also creating a business in that kind of service industry. For instance, buying help for the cleaning of the houses, for the shopping, whatever you do, and you can actually deduct it on your tax ticket. So you have this initiative saying, okay, you collect all the bills, and when the year is over, each adult in the household can actually deduct in the tax bill. So that creates, I would say, probably more equal division within the unpaid work. But you also need to create awareness of all the work in having a family and having a household run. And that is something that we, I think, often fail to do when we talk about how we get our wages in the labor market. How about all the unpaid work?
So you say you're getting inspiration from, example, Sweden. Do you have any? What are your ambition going forward now? Like, what do you like to do something about? Parental leave is one thing, but do you have any goals for the next years? Where do you want your countries to be?
I would like to say it's very important that women in the Faroe Islands, I said before, a big number of them have high educations, but we don't see them in boards yet in the industry, and we don't see many female leaders. So I think that's a very important issue to work on.
And how can you work on that?
Together with the businesses, and maybe we have to make a law about it. I'm not afraid of making laws, but I would like to get awareness about it first, and maybe they can commit themselves.
So a law could be that you have to have a certain percentage of the boardroom employed by women.
Yeah, we have had a campaign in politics in the Faroe Islands, women in politics. That was something that we achieved from the West Nordic countries.
It went from 15% to 30%.
To 30%, and now we have to broaden this out in the industry and in the working places. Was
that because of politics that you went from 15% of women in politics to 50 to 30? It was
a committee that the West Nordic countries agreed on to. It was from copied from Iceland, and it was a campaign to get women engaged in politics and to get men and women to elect women. And that has gone very fast, actually. I think it started in 2008, and then now we are 30% in parliament, and the government is 50-50. We went from, in 2008, there were only men in the government, and in 12 there were 1 woman and 7 men, and now we are 50-50. So if we can make these changes out to the industries also, that's very important.
So this government often in Denmark often gets, I don't know if you can call it teased about not being 50-50 in when you talk about equality and what you call gender equality in ministers, but also when you talk about boardrooms, you're very against forcing this. Yeah, you're nodding.
Let me just admit that I'm liberal, and that's why I'm not really. It's not that I'm afraid of legislation. I do lots of legislation, but I think there is to a certain extent, legislation is not the way to go. And I think it's a great example from Faroe Islands that you actually see the increase of, for instance, women participating and running for seats in politics and doing it through awareness. And in my perspective, I know that Norway has done quotas in the boards for women, and I know that they're saying, of course, the figures are there because they've made legislation about it. But what they are also seeing right now is the discussion of what is the feeding into these positions. And I definitely think that we need more diverse boards in our companies. And I know that the companies want the same because it's good for the baseline. People and boards make better decisions when you have a diverse board, when you actually look into the problems from different perspectives. And only a diverse board of directors can do that. So in that perspective, you need to have a more diverse mindset when you look into it. So what I see, you ended up asking, what are the big challenges?
Yeah.
I think we definitely do have some big challenges in the way women or girls or boys choose education, choose which kind of education to take. We do still have some very strange, well, not strange, but that's just a fact right now, that still a majority of women are in the caretaking business, in the pedagogue, in the school system, and so on. And we still have a majority of men in science and technology. And these kind of cross seeks is necessary.
Is that something you're looking into?
Yes, we're looking into that, looking into having more girls and women choosing STEM, the science, technology, and math lines, because we definitely need a more diverse mass of educated young people in this, not only a majority of boys. So we look into that, not with legislation, but with awareness, creating awareness, both for parents when you give advice to your children in what education to take, but of course also for the ground schools to be aware of how you actually give advice to young people when it comes to choosing education and looking into future opportunities.
Ms. Samuelsen?
I think it's a combination of the two things, awareness and campaigns, and also legislation. I don't want to jump to legislate immediately, but if you take the campaign about women in Faroese politics, it has been tried many times before it actually happened. It was the third or fourth time you had campaigns and talked about the issue, but it didn't succeed. But suddenly it did after so many years. So it's something about you have to make awareness, and you have to talk about things and get them in the open. But when it's general structures in the society, I think you also have to, if you don't want to wait too long, you also have to legislate sometimes. So it's a combination of both things, I think. And some things takes too long if you don't legislate. But that's only my opinion. But you have to combine these two things, I think.
Allow myself just to end this dialogue with just a small interesting finding. In the Nordic Council of Ministers, we were discussing how the different boards in the different Nordic institutions, how did it actually look on the gender map. So we made a research. There are no quotas in there, but we made a research. And it was extremely interesting for me to to look into these different institutions, because free to my memory, there were like 5 or 6 institutions saying that there was extremely many men. It was like 80% men, 20% women. But there were also like 4 or 5 where it was the opposite way around. But the discussion to start with, the presentation was only, there you have the problem. There's 80% men and 20% women. And I was like, yeah, but there's also a problem there. You have 80% women and 20% men. So we need to be very much diverse in our work and making sure that we don't, I mean, right now, yesterday we had the UN Girls' Day, Girls' Child Day. My social media platforms were taken over by 2 young girls from Bangladesh talking about women's rights and ending child marriage and all these extremely important things when it comes to girls' rights. But I have been, having huge debates from men being very angry about this. Why do you make women take over your side? You're only a minister for women. And it was extremely interesting to see that kind of frustration. So I think we just, all of us, need to be very aware of the equal opportunities and not being so extremely only focused on the figures, but on the equal opportunities.
No doubt it's a sensitive area. Thank you so much. It's 2 very different countries, 2 very different ways of doing things. Mrs. Ellemann, Mrs. Samuelsen, thank you so much.